check on YouTube whether the preview shows that we are seen and we are. Also, you can confirm if you are there that you are listening, you are hearing us, and you see us. So we have now the second day of Dotnetos Conference. We are starting with Timothy, that has moved from the country of hobbits. So you will also introduce yourself in a second. From my side, I only want to remind you that we thank to our diamond sponsors that allows this conference to happen. So thank you Allegro Pay, thank you Demand for being with us and supporting us. And I will also give you a link to our Discord where we have a place for discussions if you would like to discuss during the whole conference. Also, there is a discount for our courses that we have made, so I will also send a link in a moment on chat. And I will also remind you that there is a .netos.org or conf.netos.org page where you can look at the whole agenda of the today and tomorrow. And that's probably all. I will not take your time, Timothy, so thank you very much for being with us. The scene is yours, and I'm hiding myself and listening to you. So good luck.
Thank you, Conrad. I am a software architect at Demand. I joined them about 6 years ago as a software developer. Originally, I'm from New Zealand. I moved to Warsaw 12 years ago, and my experience includes mobile, web, and desktop application development, using a wide range of technologies for different things, like basically all .NET, all C#, but then also going onto farms using Bluetooth and on-farm equipment. I'm married with 3 children. After this, I need to get one son to karate, and my youngest child is currently in bed, and there is a risk he'll wake up sometime soon and need my attention. Hopefully he'll be happy going and watching TV. I have thought about the audience for today. I know that everyone here has knowledge that they believe is obvious, but that someone else doesn't have. So a few people are desktop developers, we've got web developers, mobile developers, we've got people who are really good with databases, some people who are keenly aware of issues that come about with network latency, what kind of problems we start having as we put more and more calls in for the same data. We've got people who program for other hardware. For Demand, we are working quite a lot with hearing aids, with fitting media to program hearing aids. We've got people who are working in Azure. And that's all experience that some of you will think everything about this is really obvious, and someone else will have no idea depending on your specialty and experience. At conferences, I think we learn a lot about new things. We learn what's coming in the next version of .NET. We learn about what's coming in the next version of C#. We learn about new libraries. We learn about new tools. We learn about new ways of doing things. Sometimes diagnosing problems. It's not very often that people go through the process diagnosing a problem and then fixing it based on real-world examples. So today we are going to go through some of my experiences. And experience is something that you don't get until just after you need it, as Stephen Wright said. So while we can tell a story that makes us sound really good and as though we did everything perfectly in diagnosis, normally there was a bit of pain at some point. Things were not done optimally. We actually needed to get help from someone, maybe consultants were called in as well. Some of that may be mentioned today as well, but you might be sitting here thinking, well, it's clearly this or that or the other thing. That's something that I had to learn on the way through. So it is one of the areas where we see what's obvious to one person isn't always obvious to another person as well. So normal work is most of us working in teams. We sit down, we write code, maybe we have daily stand-up, refinements, retrospectives, planning if we're working in Agile. Maybe we're just pulling features from a backlog and delivering feature after feature after feature. And over time, these are released to customers and clients or to the market. Our feedback is, well done, great job, full score, partial score, whatever it is. And we go to work on the next feature based on priority or whatever it is that we're working based on. Maybe it's the thing that we're most interested in working in next, but we work on the next feature. Resolving issues in production, on the other hand, we get feedback really quickly. It's not this thing where you have a product owner or a business owner or a project manager saying great job, but you don't see what the final impact is. When the issue is in production, you get feedback about the value of your work really quickly. Any progress helps, especially when the problem is big. As soon as they, like a customer or end user for some of the big systems, can see that progress is being made, they stop panicking a little bit and you're able to start resolving more of the problem because they can see, yes, there's progress. And you also get the opportunity to learn in a really short time about things before diagnosing a problem. And that's all part of the fun of resolving issues in production. A few years ago, I joined a company and joined a new team. And the project manager said, yeah, welcome to the team. Everything is on fire. I thought, that's probably a good start. I don't know too much about this technology that's being used apart from its .NET. So I'll learn a lot really quickly, though maybe not fast enough, but we'll see. So overall, this system was built on a CRM system. It's .NET, C#, things I was familiar with there, and on SQL Server for the backend. I'd never used the CRM before, so it was a very good opportunity to learn a lot about it in a short time. So as I was working, one of my teammates started asking me for information. He's like, okay, I need to know how to get the total costs. Okay, what's it for? And he said, it's for a report. So, okay. So he was pulling the data from SQL Server. So he created 2 reports. One of them showed a summary of data for a single customer. He was getting information about one field at a time from me. And the second report showed the same summary data, but for many customers based on search results. And he finished this work. And then there was a new priority item for me to start working on. Apparently, the performance wasn't quite up to what the client expected. The first report wasn't loading very quickly. And this was just to show summary data for one customer. Not 20, not 300, just one. The second report, they didn't even get to see the result of. It timed out after 20 minutes for their search. So not only are we now learning a new CRM system, we're now learning a new report system. Knowing that it was going to a SQL Server backend, an obvious starting point was to look at the queries to SQL Server Management Studio, or through SQL Server Management Studio. The indexes all appeared to be working correctly, but to calculate or to show the costs, being queried. To calculate income, income was being queried 3 times. Something not quite right on the report. So we have a closer look at the report. The report has both visible fields and invisible fields. And the visible fields are reading data from invisible fields. And I wasn't completely sure. It appeared every one of these fields caused a read from the database, even though the data were already present on the report and had been pulled before. And at least one of these invisible fields was doing a calculation. So costs and income being a total profit. So the first fix was to use only the visible fields and to get rid of all of the invisible fields. Clearly, this was quick and it resulted in a minor improvement. Unfortunately, this was not good enough for the second report yet. So we started by applying the fixes from the first report. They were safe, we could do them quickly. And now we're looking at one request per cell in a table for a report for thousands of customers. So this fix clearly wasn't enough. So one of the things is that the database did appear to be responding quickly. Even for production, it wasn't as fast as the test setup. So we couldn't perfectly replicate and test what the problem was in production. But we knew that a key problem was there being multiple calls to the database to fill the first report or the second report. Knowing that a stored procedure would allow us to get all of the data back for one customer in one query, and for all of them also in one query with a different stored procedure, we were able to come up with a way that would reduce the total loading time of a report to the point that I receive a message from my colleague who's on the client side. The reports were just loaded and our project manager was dancing. It's not normal in day-to-day work with normal development to get this level of excitement for fixing something. Normally, when we're working on features, there'll be a problem, it'll be fixed. Good work. Carry on. When you something customer is going to rely on and it cannot be seen, it cannot be demonstrated because it times out, the moment it starts working, you get a very happy result from the customer side. And this is a joy that I think a lot more people should experience. So there are some lessons from this. The first one is that you need to confirm your beliefs and expectations. The developer of the reports didn't realize that querying the same data or that writing the report the way he'd done it was going to query the database multiple times for the same data. Once we discovered this, we were able to get the first improvement. For some people, it is painfully obvious that calling the database 200,000 times is going to be really slow. Other people aren't aware of this, and it's very important to realize that both sets of people exist, because then you can talk to the other set and help explain this. So that was one story. In this story, it's at a different company, and I'm in the role of a consultant, and I don't have access to any of the source code. We've been working on rolling out a new version of this business analysis and data visualization platform. We've done a lot of testing and preparation, and we knew that the new version was going to need higher system requirements. So new servers have been commissioned as well. We've gone through the full process of upgrading test and making sure that the test environment works. We've made sure that performance was good. There had been a problem in the past where there had been poor performance on one of the sites. So people were much more vigilant about testing than they had been earlier. So there'd been weeks of planning and testing before this upgrade had happened. So one Saturday, those of us that were involved in that upgrade went into the office. We installed the software to the new servers. We ran some tests for a while. Everything had gone smoothly. So we handed the platform over to operations, and they began their testing. And So clearly, once everything is successful, you celebrate. So we went back, we had a nice barbecue, told stories. And on Monday morning, I'm on the way to work. So this was back before COVID, when everyone was going to the office on weekdays. And I think I received a text message while I was on the train to work saying, yeah, operations is reporting major problems. Seems like the system is out. The first problem was insufficient memory based on Task Manager. So the resolution, add more memory. I have never seen a faster install of memory than that one. However, after memory is added, a new problem becomes apparent. The servers are hanging every 5 minutes. So we looked at what we knew. We knew the configuration of the servers. We knew how the load balancers were set up. The only thing we could identify that ran every 5 minutes was the synchronizing of LDAP. So our first action was to change the frequency of LDAP synchronization. We did not expect this to resolve the problem. LDAP synchronization had not caused any issues in the past, but we knew that we at least had to rule it out. So we made the change, and the result was no change. Every 5 minutes, more or less like clockwork, the system would come to a complete halt. So with this platform and a simplified layout, we have our main server. And it's load balanced, but for this purpose, I've got a main server. This server will read a bunch of stuff from the software's database, and it's reading a lot of data from various data centers that can be presented to reports. There are users who access this system via software installed on laptops. This software allows them to view reports. It also allows them to create reports. And then way out here, we have the web server. Again, the web servers are load balanced. And then we have people who are viewing the reports. We have where to start. We know that the database server seems to be okay. All of its performance statistics are fine. We know that we are not users of the data center or any of those databases, and no one else is having problems. Therefore, we know it's not a problem with the data centers, which means we're now looking at the software we've just installed on the server or the web server. Well, we believe that's what the problem is. At which point we needed to call on consultants. With the help of the consultants, we identified that the problem seemed to be on the web servers. Using Process Explorer from SysInternal Suite, it became apparent that every 5 minutes, there'd be a second generation garbage collection every 5 minutes, and it would happen that there would be 117 collections. Always 117 collections. Eventually, from the IIS logs, we were able to identify one report that was being loaded every 5 minutes, and then garbage collection would begin. We could also load this report on the client application and observe the same pattern of 117 second generation garbage collections. So we knew at this point that it was something special about this report. What can a report do? Well, this report didn't get data from a standard database. It was loading data from SharePoint. And SharePoint wasn't native functionality of this platform, but it could be supported by a custom component. And one of these had been installed, and it allowed collecting connection to SharePoint. And this turned out to be one of 2 components that had gc.collect in its code. So we were able to get both a workaround and a fix. So the workaround was to disable the second plugin, and for the first one, okay, clearly everyone that needs to access this report needs to continue to access it. One of the functions built into the software, into this platform, was that you could load a report and tell it to stay in memory, which meant that even if a browser refreshed, the report would stay in memory. It would not it wouldn't reload the report. So the people who needed the report were happy, their report was visible, they had the data they needed to access, and everyone else was able to work, and there were no more issues. The data visualization software worked perfectly after that. And then for the fix, the vendor of this component that had included gc.collect released a new version that didn't call gc.collect, and we installed this. At which point we reverted the workaround, and we were able to carry on with testing to ensure everything was still stable and there were no problems. So there are some observations. The first thing is we had a significant increase in memory. So before the upgrade, I think the servers had 8 gigs of RAM. Maybe they only had 4 gigs, but IIS wasn't using that much. After the upgrade, we needed 128 gigs of RAM. So we believe that the memory usage of IIS had gone from being under 4 gigs to being over 80 gigs. For a client user, so that's one of the people that might be developing a report on a laptop, the total memory of the application was quite low. And they expected data being loaded to take a moment, or a report being loaded to take a moment, and 117 garbage collections on a very small amount of memory, much less than 80 gigs, takes nowhere near as long as on 80 gigs. So for them, no issues on the laptops. So as developers, I think many of us have been told, yeah, you shouldn't be writing gc.collect in your code. Most of us haven't been there to see what happens when someone has gc.collect on a web application. So if you want 40-second plus outages, .NET 4.1 and gc.collect. I understand that there have been improvements to the garbage collector, and it was significantly improved in .NET 4.5 onwards. The next side of it is that some people think more memory is faster, and quite often it is. In the case of garbage collection, it's the opposite. And while it's, for me, it's obvious that more memory will take longer to do garbage collection on, this did take some explaining to the guy in charge of operations, as he's not, and it made no sense to him that more memory would actually be significant. I see what one person has commented, the GC. So for our third one, we have a wonderful story that involves location. So we have a search site, and it allows you to search based on some criteria. One of them is the location. So at this place, all developers and even a tester were trained on test-driven development. We did TDD in the office every day. We were nearly always pair programming. There was an exception, and that was style changes in the CSS, but those were still reviewed. I remember one day a product owner came and he said, "Wait, you guys are really pair programming? Wouldn't it be faster?" We said, no, this is the way we work, and I think he dropped it shortly after that. And the developers and the testers wrote UI tests. So we all had a fairly good understanding of how the test system worked. It was only the testers who wrote load tests and gathered statistics, the performance results, as far as I'm aware. And the other rule was that nobody deployed to production on Friday, especially Friday afternoon. So we may have had 4 to 8 release slots a week. So our feature was changing the database used for searching for some criteria. And it had been behind a feature toggle for a long time, and we were used to releasing behind a feature toggle more than once a week. So we could go 2, 3, 4 times a week releasing to production. And that meant that the group of customers who had access to this feature, they'd been given a special link, would be able to see that the new database was working and meeting their expectations with respect to the search results. The whole time, all of the tests were passing. As we got close to the time for switching so that the new database was going to be the database used by everyone, a bunch of load tests were performed first to make sure there would be no issues in production once we went live. We implemented the banner welcoming people new database. That was put in place, signed off. May have gone live on a Wednesday morning, I'm not quite sure, but we got very quick feedback that the performance was not good enough. All the customers then put back to the previous version. One of the good things is that searching was done using GET. So we were able to get all of the queries from the IIS logs with the query strings. There was some tamper-proofing in the query string, which meant that we couldn't just run the query strings on our machines, but we had the source code. We were able to remove the or disable the tamper-proofing and get all of the queries, and then the team that would investigate the performance issue was able to work out what the problem was. So in this case, it was location, being that the location calculation was taking way too long. So the team that was looking after that part of the database and search fixed it. New performance tests were created that also searched by location. All of the tests passed and the feature was re-released. So clearly, one of the things that worked really well was green-blue deploys. The moment there was a problem identified, it was able to be switched back instantly without any problems. Testing worked really well as well. The only issue that we had the whole time was this one performance thing. We were deploying, as I said, multiple times a week to a small test base of users. They never had any issues with the logic being wrong, with incorrect data in the results, incorrect formatting. Everything was working correctly based on the really good culture of testing and test-driven development. There is a lesson here though, and that is to validate your tests. Is this what real users do? And for this, that's not to say that the tester should have validated the tests. There were many of us that could have looked at the tests and asked, are we testing enough? And I suspect that this was a load test that they'd run traditionally for many years, and it had always worked. And the fact that we had changed the database is what caused this gap in the load tests to be identified. So I don't think tests were the same as the ones. And to say that there was a problem with the tests and it's the tester's fault would be like losing a football game for scored a goal when you missed 15 shots on goal yourself. So it's not that there was just one single person that missed this detail. Maybe data wasn't analyzed to see that we needed to test because everyone searched by location. Maybe there was something else. If you're looking for more resources, such as how to become a diagnoser, yesterday evening I watched this talk, also from Dotnetos. It was very interesting. I have run out of content at this point. Are there any questions?
We don't have any questions from the chat or Discord, but I'm happy, or maybe I would say happy to see the GC problem. As
It
always,
shows itself in an amazing way.
at least it is a confirmation that it can't cause troubles, because as you know, I'm a GC guy, and sometimes people don't believe me that automatic memory management in .NET can cause troubles, because it is automagic, but still it can, as you see.
Well, if it had been automatic, it would have been fine in this case. The problem was that put gc.collect in the code. And 117 is 39 times, no, 13 times, yeah. It's definitely not a prime number, so it's 39 times 13. So I don't know if it happened in a loop or if it was just as it was looping over the data or what it was. It was just very obvious that there were these 117 calls every 5 minutes.
Yeah. This also shows the importance of like monitoring the perf. For example, at least if you have some visibility how often you are calling GC, how often GC are happening, then you can correlate such things like, okay, we have this issue every 5 minutes because we have a spike in number of GC calls. But then there is always this problem what to measure, right? Because typically we know that we need to measure something only after the problem.
Exactly. And with this one, it was also that it was and then yes, custom component. So we had no access to any of the diagnostics that they could have there for themselves. So we were just testing with the tools available to us.
Yeah.
But we were very happy to identify the issue.
And by the way, do you have any experience in this? Because there were difficult. I mean, there were various types of problems, like performance problems, mostly performance degradations. So, do you have any experience in setting up this performance tracking visibility in your projects, like how to observe it? Any thoughts about that?
So
In general, yeah,
in our current work, for my part of the system where I'm an architect, we are working on ensuring that we've got metrics being added all the time so we know what the real world performance is. So I am working on what's called fitting software, and we have software running on desktop computers, laptop computers, by hearing care professionals. So there'll be some data about how long certain features take to run on their machines. And we've also got automated tests running, gathering performance data on a regular basis so we can track what the performance is over time, if it's getting better, if it's worse, if it's stable, as well as many sensors inside the application to track the performance.
Nice. There is always this problem of how to measure something not on production, because there are some cases when only on production we can really measure, like the volume of users may be really hard to reproduce, or maybe some specific, as in your case, some specific data, reports, or behavior of users that no one expects, and only real customers really will perform those tests on production. So there is always this problem, but I believe at least we can try to guess, try to make some tests, try to make some workloads, load test, continuous performance monitoring, and so on. That's nice. The questions, do we have any more questions, everyone? Let's give a last minute for possibility of questions. And if not, we will slowly end probably. So just 1 minute to have a possibility to ask you. By the way, in your everyday work, if it is related to performance, what's your perception? What are the typical bottlenecks or problems? Is it still database? Like,
For us, we aren't working, like the team I'm in, we're not working on something that's accessing the database regularly. So there'll be an initial load that might come from a database somewhere else. But it's not that we get a lot of database interaction. So it's one of the lesser problems for us.
Okay. This really depends on the type of the system, right? And the project.
Exactly. So for us, we've probably got more issues. So we have recently had one performance issue where there was a call that needed, so that was a bit surprising for us, but those things do happen from time to time. We were able to identify it and resolve it, but it's not that it was a regular problem, and it was also one of the types of issues that would have been very hard to just imagine that this would happen.
Yeah, only on production we can discover.
Only ever in production.
Yeah. And when, for example, upgrading something, this is one of these problematic points in time. When you upgrade, you may upgrade .NET framework, Java framework, database drivers, whatever. I believe, as you said, this performance test that you are doing is something that tries to guess whether it will be performance degradation, right?
It was basic testing just to make sure everything still worked, that it took roughly the same time as before. But it wasn't done with really strict timers or anything, anything automated. But we tested it, and an operations team tested it, and everyone thought everything was completely okay.
Yeah. At least it didn't happen during the weekend, but on Monday it is better scenario than.
Oh, yeah. At least Monday was when people started using it. So
exactly. It also depends on the workload of the app. It's better to have an app that is not used over weekends. Yeah. So we don't have any more questions, so probably we can slowly land. Thank you very much for being with us and for all those scenarios. I hope we will meet somewhere someday, maybe at some conference. And have a nice day. Thank you for listening us, and thank you for watching. See you in the next session. We will be there in a little bit more than 20 minutes. See you. Thank you.